Welcome to Climate Forward. My name is Manso Philip Garabaghi, and I'm your host. In this episode, I speak to Thaddeus Anim-Somuah. Teddy is a future energy leader at the World Energy Council and a European Climate Pact ambassador.
If you buy something in the Netherlands, it might have been made in China. So those emissions are actually happening in China. So in this way, the whole world is interconnected. Every cent that you spend is actually a vote. It's a vote for the company and the whole supply chain.
Thaddeus Anim-Somuah, welcome to the Climate Forward podcast. I'm very happy to have you today.
Thanks very much, Monsieur.
We talked before, I can call you Teddy.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. So Teddy, you're a Climate Pact ambassador and you're also a future energy leader. And you also have a job at a very large multinational company. Maybe you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, so we're here today because I'm a Climate Pact ambassador for the EU, the grassroots movement. Climate action is a passion of mine, and that's why I got involved in it. But it's something that I've been able to translate also into, let's say, my day job. I'm an engineer. I work at Cargill, which you mentioned is a multinational. It's known for like agriculture and food. I work within its chemical division, and I've done a lot of work on the energy transition within parts of Cargill and previously within Croda, which was the Performance Technologies division, was acquired by Cargill. And I'm also a part of the World Energy Council, where I'm a future energy leader there. And there we really, as an NGO, we bring together all the stakeholders from the energy environment, and we really focus on, humanizing the energy transition and making it happen, really. So I'm just trying to translate different parts of my passion into actual results.
A lot of interesting activities and jobs. Can you explain a little bit? Because you mentioned the World Energy Council. What is it?
Yeah, so we are one of the UN mandated bodies for energy. We have member countries, so more than 90 or so member countries. We bring together stakeholders. When we're talking about stakeholders, we're talking about leaders of energy industry businesses, also consumers and within big consumers within the energy government that we're bringing together, ministers. And we also have our Future Energy Leaders program, which is kind of our youth branch, our under 35 branch. I'm a board member within that. So, and we get involved within a lot of the activities that the World Energy Council is doing. For instance, we are organizing World Energy Congress. It's going to be in Rotterdam in April, but we also have had activities such as helping Aberdeen, the city of Aberdeen, create its energy transition roadmap. When we're looking at these things, we're assessing the performance of the whole energy system of a country, let's say, for different countries, and I individually did part of that for the Netherlands. So we're doing lots of different things where we bring people together in that World Energy Council, and yeah, it's exciting to be a part of that and really discuss, but also see the discussions come to action in some cases. So it is a think tank, but it's not only about thinking. It's really about making a change with the advice that you bring out. Essentially, educating, empowering, engaging. That's what we're trying to do.
And that very much fits your role at the European Climate Pact as an ambassador, also, right? There's some overlaps, and you mentioned the word energy a lot.
Yes. So. yeah. Well, I'm generally a high energy person, so so it's good. And actually, the European Climate Pact is something that is I've been more involved in as an individual on the grassroots point, and I've looked a lot into energy transition as one of the key things that I want to change. Also, circular economy. But I see those things as very linked, actually, and two things that we really need to address to, change the narrative, change the future,
This also impacted, or this also had a role in your job, right? Before you joined Cargill.
Yeah, so within Croda and within Performance Technologies, part of Croda, my title was Engineering Manager Projects. And one of the things that I was responsible for leading was our decarbonisation roadmap. So Croda, it went out and made an ambition to halve its emissions absolutely from 2018 to 2030, and this is a bold ambition. They got it, done and checked by science-based targets. It is exactly what we need, actually, all companies to do. We need the whole world to do this if we want to achieve the 1.5 Celsius. But ambitions are all good, right? The next step is, okay, let's do it, because there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of ambitions. Even Paris Agreement was full of ambitions, and we haven't seen any of the results in action yet. And that's where I was lucky to be able to, get directly involved with high-level people within Croda to make an actual roadmap, a plan of all of the initiatives that we needed to do. We put down how much these initiatives are going to cost. We put down what we need to do right now. Because some of them, things that are there, is actions that, let's say, low-hanging fruit, efficiency, whether that's building isolation, metering, better control systems that you can do now. And some of it is technologies that you need to invest in and chemistries that you need to invest in to reduce inherently the energy of your process, stuff that technology that is maybe doesn't exist yet. So you need to start partnering with universities now in order for that technology to be available later. And, we take an active role in it because, let's say, hoping that the government will solve it all and you'll just be able to electrify everything is not the way. Because, if everybody electrifies, or everybody suddenly gets a hydrogen, which also is going to green hydrogen, also going to come from electricity, let's say. We don't have the grid for that. We don't have the network for that. And it's not coming, we also need to drive electric cars, and we also need to think about where even all the materials going to come from. So the key before that you make the energy switch to sustainable energy is to first reduce the demand. And that's what we were looking at, and also, energy recovery initiatives and things like that. Really also looking at partnerships, partnering with sometimes companies that would traditionally be competitors, in order to, realize these joint ambitions together.
Really, really exciting stuff. I think these are exactly the steps that many, many more companies need to take. And you were talking about emission reduction. This is, I think, very, very often you can link this to energy transition. What sources of energy do we consume? And maybe you can talk a little bit more about the topic of energy transition, because that touches upon your role today at Cargill. It touches upon your role in the NGO, the World Energy Council, as a future energy leader. And it touches upon what you are focusing on as a European Climate Pact ambassador. And I know these are three things. Let's go through them step by step, because I do think that is a really interesting narrative that we're we're going to explore here together.
Yeah, so basically when we're talking about the energy transition, it's really all comes down to reducing our CO2 emissions. That's what we're talking about. And greenhouse gases, CO2 equivalent emissions. And that means that we need to essentially change from the fossil fuels that we're currently using. But it doesn't just mean, the kind of electricity or gas that you're burning at home. Major parts of that is also coming from industry, right? So it means actually kind of whole sectoral change, and it's all interconnected. And so it's not just about when we're looking at countries, what we do in the Netherlands doesn't only affect the Netherlands. If you buy something in the Netherlands, it might have been made in China. So those emissions from the manufacturing are actually happening in China. So in this way, the whole world is interconnected, and that's why the energy transition is so important. We still got systematic barriers which are kind of stopping the energy transition, and the number one is, let's say, money, the economy, and that's something that we ran into also very quickly when I was doing, let's say, the decarbonization roadmap within Cargill, Croda it was then, because we wrote down all these ideas on paper, and the numbers came out, and it was like, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. And then that's the point where people put your money where your mouth is. I say, and other people have said, your values only count when they're tested, right? And so what we did there and what was done there is we created internal carbon pricing. So we valorized, we said, okay, there's no way that in the traditional system we will ever justify any of these projects because they don't make enough money for us. They cost a lot of money, and we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. So let's put a value on it. Let's put a system on it. And so we put internal carbon pricing into shadow pricing. We put it in place there to make sure that these projects got through. And then what you see a lot as well is these, let's say, so you've got something for now, but in the systems, there's changes of management, changes just like there's changes of government, changes of priorities, something else comes up. So what was done there and what was done well is that the intermediate targets, and the intermediate targets had accountability. So right up to the top, there was some, incentives such as bonuses linked to achieving of this and the creation and achieving of this decarbonization roadmap. So it's baked in. You've made a systematic change. And, we can, as a corporate, make this systematic change, let's say, within, but we can also have governments enforce it on us. And I think there's also something that we are trying to create also with the European Climate Pact, is that individuals can make this change happen. People like you doing these podcasts as well as a part of making that happen.
This is a beautiful narrative that ends up at the European Climate Pact, and I very much relate to what you said, that there is governments taking steps, there are corporations voluntarily taking steps, and I'm really thankful for these thought leaders or front runners, because they have to also deliver the numbers, and like you said, making sustainability targets part of the remuneration, the short-term and long-term remuneration of the top management is one way of really making sure this is happening. And then we're ending up at the European Climate Pact, and that fits really well also how the European policy is set up, right? You have the Green Deal, and then it trickles down, and the European Climate Pact is this effort or this undertaking to involve citizens in this dramatic change that we're seeing on our continent, also on a global level. And there we're coming to a topic where it goes, or where we're talking about individual accountability. Do I have to contribute? Does my contribution make a difference? And I think that's also something we need to talk about, right? When we're talking energy transition.
Yeah, and I think actually everybody's contribution makes a difference because we've all got in this situation together. We can blame our parents, we can blame governments, we can blame fossil fuel companies, tobacco companies, but at the end of the day, we're all in this situation together. We've all got into it somehow, and we've all got to get out of it. Companies, we can blame them all we like, but at the end of the day, they're making money. That's their job, to make money. And if they don't make money, they can't employ people. And so they got to make money. And they will follow where the money is. And some people might say that's evil and they should always do the right thing. And there's other ways to make money. But if we change where the money is, they will also follow. And who has the power to change that? There's two. There's the governments and then there's the people. But governments are also, let's say, they're democratically elected. You know, they make some decisions, but the decisions can't be too unpopular, otherwise they won't get elected again, and they might even be kicked out during their term. So how can we as individuals, you know, take on our part? And, you know, part of it is the engagement and education piece, you know, getting the message out there. And so people understand the urgency, people understand what is at stake, what is going on, and you know, and people will actually start to behave, and in a certain way, which is sustainable. And what I say to myself is, you know, every cent that you spend is actually a vote. It's a vote for the company and the whole supply chain that's in it. And so if you want to change the world, your world, right, there's ways of doing that, which can be win-win, which is like turning the thermostat down, that you save energy. That's a win-win way. And there's also some ways, just like for these companies, that are going to cost you more money, but it might be the right thing to do. Like, you know, taking public transport and instead of getting in your car, you know, and that will help reduce emissions as well. And, you know, you say, oh, but public transport isn't bad. Well, government will invest in public transport if enough people are taking it. So the circle will go. And the real reason why, oil and gas investments keep going up, although the IEA has said, actually, we need to have stopped this yesterday. And, you know, the UN is saying that, you know, it's a catastrophe what's going on. It is because the demand is there, right? And they can still make great money. And as long as they can make great money, they're going to make that money. You know, oil and gas companies have announced record profits last year as well, and the year before, even during COVID. So what we can change that is, you know, the circular economy. We should actually consume less. That's the key. We need to, as a world, we need to consume less. And we need to, as people in the Western world, take a responsibility, because there's some people in the global South, let's say, who aren't really consuming enough to have a good standard of living. So we can't ask them to consume less. And when I mean consume less, it doesn't mean that you need to have you need to think, oh, you know, I'm not allowed to shower now because I'm not allowed to use water or something like that. But, you know, your consumptions or your choices, it's, you know, you can, for instance, when you're talking about circular economy, you can choose to share a car, you know, instead of buy a car. And when you share a car, you can choose to share an electric car, for instance. You can choose to, buy a phone and keep it for a longer period of time, or buy one which you can repair, or choose to repair something when it instead of buy a new one when it breaks. In terms of and when you do break something, you can choose to take it to the recycling instead of throwing it away, even if there's not much money in it for you. Recycle it anyway. What's putting, taking those steps and putting that glass in the glass bin gonna do to you? It's good. Walking's good for your health, like, and all these steps. If you start investing in the circular economy, if you stop asking for a plastic bag at the supermarket, nobody's going to be selling plastic bags at the supermarket anymore. Nobody's going to make plastic bags. The whole plastic bag industry is going to go. Everybody's going to be bringing their own bags. The emissions from plastic bags, the waste from plastic being in the ocean will end, from that behavior, let's say. So, and this is how the circular economy is actually the critical way to get out of this. And the consumer is the critical person, and the individual, I think, and really the social education and engagement piece is the key to making this happen. Because government will regulate, but they will never regulate enough to make this happen. If we look on the historical side of stuff, they haven't done it. And unless individuals force them. But individuals can also just force the companies to do what they want to do. Not even with protesting, just with putting their money in what they believe in.
I very much second this opinion of the power of the consumer and of the individual, particularly in our social or socio-economic environment where we're living here in the Western world. I think we need to become aware how much power we actually wield, right? This is every cent is a vote, like you said. And in one of the past episodes, I spoke to Dr. Alexander Frech, who was managing a water management company, and he also shared some examples how we can save, in his case, on water use, but still have the same level of comfort. And I think your example of car sharing is one of these, right? It does not, I keep the same level of comfort because there's a car around every corner, which I can just take in terms of car sharing. So I keep the level of comfort, but I reduce the number of cars that are produced or are used with probably standing around. I don't know, there are studies, 70% of the time cars are just standing around, something like this.
Exactly. And even if you decide, okay, I really need a car, why do you need a new car? Why not buy a used car? And then if you buy a used one, it's already been produced. The emissions are already, from the production, they're already there, You don't need to, because what's happening with all those used stuff at the end of the day is it going to landfill, it's going to pollute the oceans. And this is why we need to get out of the, the linear economy into the circular economy in order to make the energy transition happen, in order to make the toxicity reduction happen as well, the loss of biodiversity in our oceans, in our rainforests, that's also critically linked to that. And I think also in our companies, if the consumers start to move a bit, that will give people who are, let's say, internal activists in the company so much more power. Because right now, the companies have to fight with themselves. And they sometimes do it on a risk management basis. This is, I think, and sometimes they do it on we can sell ourselves at a premium basis, right? Risk management is we're scared that the government's going to force us to do it, so let's do it. Not because necessarily only because it's the right thing to do, but let's get ahead of the government and do it now because it'll be cheaper. When the government forces it, it'll be more difficult, and everybody will be doing it, and blah blah blah. And the premium side is we can make even more money out of it than what we're doing now. But this is just not always the case. Sometimes, they don't believe in the risk that the government's going to force them to do it, or they say, "Oh, we'll wait and see," or the risk just isn't there. Let's say. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, sustainability is just more expensive. There's some low-hanging fruit, which is great, but sometimes it's just more expensive. And they're not going to make always more money out of it. And they need to do it because it's the right thing to do, because it's going to save the planet. But more than that, it's going to save humanity and our society, you know. And as individuals in those companies, we can make a change, but we need some helping hands. You know, if once the consumers start to value this stuff, you know, we can also come in. We're consumers within the company as well. We could say, hey, look, this is what's happening. This is where it's going. We need to be ahead. And with the age of social media and everything, you know, brand management is the key. That's why you see a lot of greenwashing happening. Companies want to be perceived well. They don't want to be on the wrong side of history. You know, you can be an internal activist. If you get some help from the outside, you could get some help from other colleagues on the inside, and you can create change all the way from the top, from grassroots again, you know?
Teddy, I love this, and I think this is also a perfect closing word because it resonates with what everyone who's engaged in the climate movement does, right? I mean, start change somewhere, get a little bit of help, and then on an individual level, trigger something that will become and grow much bigger. I could go on talking for hours with you. It's a very, very interesting topic, and there's so much more we could dive in terms of the energy transition, what still lies ahead of us. But I think in terms of time, we're a little bit at the end of our podcast here. So I want to say thank you very, very much for sharing your very interesting story. I mean, I think so many topics that are on the top of our agenda at the moment. Much appreciated. Is there something that you still want to add that we missed and that you think is really important to still mention?
I think there's a big idea that, you know, it's, like you said, just my closing words is that our level of comfort needs to go down. Or let's say, if we're looking at energy, let's say, if we need to reduce the demand by, like, you know, what happened in Russia, we lose some energy. Our energy becomes insecure. You know, when we turn on the light, it doesn't come, for instance. But that's not necessarily the case. Actually, you know, our energy will be more secure if we control, and it will be more affordable, you know, in terms of equality of access, if we do the sustainability bit as well. You know, if we control the demand, we change the way that the economy is working, we bring it down, and we work together in this. So and we can keep the same quality of life. And if we don't, we know that we're going to run into that problem, and actually then we're going to end up in a situation where we're in a desperate situation. The government will just say, probably, yeah, you're only getting energy from this time to this time, energy's up, you know, because the climate's here, you know, that's it. Or it'll get super expensive because, you know, it's we don't have enough. So actually, the best case for everyone is that we do this, you know. That's what I want to say.
Thanks a lot, Teddy. Thank you for joining me and for taking the time to sharing your thoughts here. You just listened to Thaddeus Anim-Somuah, who talked about the power of individuals to trigger change and how companies are addressing the challenges of the energy transition. If you want to hear more about the European Climate Pact ambassadors and their actions, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes.